Author, professor, philosopher, and legal scholar Martha Nussbaum. I want to start with a quote from your book, Women and Human Development. You write about philosophy in here, and you write, "Philosophy asks for public deliberation instead of the usual contest of power. It asks us to choose the view that stands the test of argument, rather than the view that has the most prestigious backers, the view that gets all the details worked out coherently and clearly, rather than the view whose proponents shout the loudest. At its best, its conceptual fussiness is profoundly practical. Only if things are worked out in all their detail will we know whether we really do have the alternatives that can stand up to objection better than another." Is this something you discovered while studying philosophy, or is this why you went into philosophy?
Oh, I think I discovered it while I was studying philosophy. I went into philosophy because the questions excited me so much. But then when I got there, I found that it was the philosophers and not so much other people who were addressing these same questions that were the people I wanted to live with, because they were committed to this kind of respectful, rigorous argument. Yes, so I discovered it, and then I never looked back.
In Poetic Justice, the other side of you, which is a legal scholar, you teach at the University of Chicago Law School, though you are not a lawyer. This is a quote in Poetic Justice from Benjamin Cardozo, former Supreme Court Justice. And you included this, and I want to look at it as pertaining to the study of law. You quote Justice Cardozo as saying, "I was very much troubled in spirit in my first years upon the bench to find how trackless was the ocean on which I had embarked. I sought for certainty. I was oppressed and disheartened when I found out that the quest for it was futile. I was trying to reach land, the solid land of fixed and settled rules, the paradise of a justice that would declare itself by tokens plainer and more commanding than its pale and glimmering reflections in my own vacillating mind and conscience." Are there no fixed rules when studying law?
Well, of course, there is a lot of structure that's been worked out over time. But I think over the years, legal education has gotten broader and more foundational. It's been more concerned with interdisciplinary inquiry and with getting students to ask the big questions about the nature of social justice, the nature of the emotions. And that's because these things haven't been finally resolved in the way that some people once thought they would be. And so to be able to go back to the roots of the questions is a very important part of the equipment of a judge and really of lawyers in lots of parts of the law.
Why is that important?
Well, it's important because otherwise you're just following tradition and authority, and you don't want to do just that. Now, of course, tradition, precedent are very important parts of the law, but I think in no democratic society is it a good thing for the very influential people to simply go along with the past. And so to be able to think rigorously about what we should be doing, and that's what I'm there to do, to teach normative theories of social justice, is very, very important.
What does normative theory mean?
Well, normative means how things should be, to try to think in a more forward-looking, ideal way, still realistic, but to think about what's the thing that we should be trying to promote. Now, I think very often in the law it's very common to think we should be promoting the maximization of total or average utility. So that's one philosophical view. It's not the view I hold. It's one that I think I respect quite a lot and I want to engage with. But I think it's important for students to see a wide range of different views about what we should be trying to promote, and then see what the argument between these views looks like.
Well, you've written or co-written 16 books total, correct?
I guess so.
Yes, you have. And we've got them all here on the set with us. But one of the things you write a lot about is world citizenship or cosmopolitanism. What is that?
It's thinking of yourself as larger than just the citizen of a single country. It's a way of looking beyond your borders and remembering that all human beings are really, at this point, bound to all other human beings by interactions of many, many kinds in the global market, through foreign policy, through environmental issues. And so we ought to be teaching and training young people to think big, to think about what our responsibilities are to the whole world. Now, some cosmopolitans then think your first duty should be to the human race as a whole, and duties to your own citizens are derivative and secondary. I don't quite agree with that. I have a much more complicated view. But in any case, what I mean by cosmopolitanism, insofar as I would ever endorse it, would just mean posing the question always, what are our responsibilities to the rest of the world, and how do they balance out against the responsibilities that we hold to our own children and our own fellow citizens?
Well, in your book, For Love of Country, Debating the Limits of Patriotism, you have written an essay, and then you have people who write opposing essays or nuanced essays against it. Is cosmopolitanism, is it opposed to patriotism?
Well, let me say, first of all, that if you define cosmopolitanism as the view that your first loyalty is always to human race as a whole and only derivatively to the country, I don't think cosmopolitanism is a good basis for a political theory of justice in a pluralistic society, because I think it's very important that a theory that holds people together in a pluralistic society is one that all the major religions and all the major secular views of human life can accept and meet in. It's what John Rawls once called an overlapping consensus. So if you define cosmopolitanism the way I just did, well, of course, many of the major religions couldn't accept that. They wouldn't think that your first duty is to the whole world and only secondarily to God or your members of your own religion or whatever. So I think that something much more minimal is the right thing to focus on in social justice. Namely, I think what we can all agree in is that all world citizens should have a basic set of fundamental opportunities, or what I call capabilities, and that we should all join together to promote that. That still leaves a lot of space for people to prefer their own fellow citizens, so it leaves a lot of room, actually, for a good type of patriotism. I mean by a good type, a type that is morally inspired, that has justice at its core, the kind of patriotism that, let's say, Jawaharlal Nehru, Mahatma Gandhi, Abraham Lincoln, Martin Luther King Jr., they all were patriots, and they all appealed to patriotic traditions. But they thought of their patriotism as focused on justice for the oppressed, and also they thought of it as, perfectly compatible with an appropriate level of concern for the whole world.
Would you consider those men to be philosophers also?
Oh, well, it's so hard to define philosophy. I get a lot of inspiration from all of them. I'll just say that. And, Nehru, because he was in jail for so many years, he wrote a great deal. And he wrote many more books than I did. But I think he's very philosophical in the way he thinks, anyway. Gandhi was much more of a practical politician who thought always about how to inspire people, what were the practical strategies, and but I think all of them had a philosophical dimension.
I was having a conversation with Jonathan Karp about a week ago. He's the new publisher at Simon & Schuster, was the publisher at 12, and when he found out that you were going to be on In Depth, he wanted to know what the importance, and I'm probably paraphrasing badly his question, but he wanted to know what you thought were the importance of the classics today. Why are they relevant in our lives, or are they relevant in our lives? What's the importance of Aristotle and Plato and Socrates, and et cetera?
Well, I guess I want to begin by saying that word classics, I think he probably means a list of great books of the Western tradition. But of course, in India, it refers to the great works of the Sanskrit tradition, and so on. So that if you use that word more broadly, of course, it includes quite a lot of what people had been struggling for in the last 20 years, and that is to bring a lot of the rest of the world into the undergraduate curriculum, which is something that I really favor and I think is very important. But, so if we mean what do a bunch of very distinguished books from the past, from lots of different countries, what value do they have? I think they shouldn't be revered and put on a pedestal. I think that would be entirely the wrong thing to do, because then you encourage young people to think, oh, I'm better than other people because I've read those books. And I fear that used to be what a lot of people ended up thinking when they went through these curricula. And, I fear that even in the past of my own great university, the core curriculum sometimes left people with that impression that, that they were superior because they'd done this.